Lillian was very proud of one thing in her life, and that thing was not her school certificate nor her cooking skill, but the title she gave herself, which was the most understanding girlfriend in Nigeria. She wore it like a crown and defended it like a national honor because, according to her, any woman that asked too many questions in a relationship was simply a bad woman with unnecessary noise. She grew up watching her mother endure plenty things from her father and still smile and call it marriage. So, from small, she already believed that love was not something you fully enjoy. It is something you manage, like a generator that spoils every week, but you still keep buying fuel for it. Anytime her mother quarreled with her father and came back to the kitchen to continue cooking as if nothing happened, Lillian used to whisper to herself, "This is how good wives behave." So, by the time she grew up fine and entered a relationship with Efe, understanding had already finished settling inside her bone. Efe was not lazy. Now, that was the funny part of the whole matter. The boy was hustling seriously, moving from one job to another, chasing contracts, carrying laptop up and down like handbag, always on call, always in meetings, and always saying, "Baby, I am building my future." And Lillian believed it with her full chest and began to make excuses for him. When Efe forgot their anniversary, Lillian smiled and said, "It's okay, you were busy, I understand." When he cancelled dates 5 times in 1 month, she said, "Hustle first, success will come later, I understand." When he spent 3 days without calling because his phone spoiled, she said, "God is testing my patience, I understand." Even when Efe openly told her one evening while they were eating bread and egg by the roadside, "Lillian, I am not ready for marriage yet oh." Lillian nodded seriously and replied, "It's fine, I am not in a hurry, I understand." But inside her heart, she was already decorating their wedding hall. Her best friend Ngozi used to shake her head anytime Lillian explained her relationship. "My friend, this thing you are calling understanding is advanced self-deceit oh." Lillian would just laugh and reply, "You don't understand love. I am just building peace for my future home." Meanwhile, Peace did not even know it was under construction. Now, as Christmas started approaching, Lillian's brain shifted gear immediately into married woman mode. Every time she passed by a shop, she saw couple clothes. Every time she saw a ring in the market, her heart jumped like a grasshopper. She would check wedding pictures on her phone and sigh deeply, like someone waiting for a miracle that already had a calendar date. She even started practicing how to say, "We are not doing anything big, oh, it's just introduction for now." Unfortunately, Efe, on the other hand, was practicing something different. He was networking harder, dressing sharper, attending bigger meetings, and entering rooms that Lillian had never imagined before. But because Lillian did not like pressing any issue, she did not ask too many questions. In her mind, questions were enemies of destiny. One day, Efe came to her place looking very tired, but she prepared hot food for him and packed extra too to take along. As he was eating, Lillian looked at him with soft eyes and said, "Christmas is close." Efe nodded distractedly. Yes. She smiled shyly. "I was thinking, family." Efe quickly wiped his mouth and said, "We'll talk later. I have an urgent meeting." Well, that later never came. Still, Lillian did not complain. She only told Ngozi later that night, "Efe is mysterious these days. Maybe he's planning a surprise." Ngozi shouted, "Yes, he's planning a surprise indeed, the kind that will give you heart attack." But Lillian did not hear the warning. She only heard wedding bells that were ringing inside her imagination without musicians. In her mind, this Christmas was not just for rice and chicken. It was for something special. By the time December entered with its usual noise of knockouts, rice price increase, and unnecessary family pressure, Lillian's brain had already entered wife mode full time, even though nobody had officially proposed anything to her. In her words, this Christmas was the Christmas of, after this one, everything would change. Efe's hustle became louder and longer at the same time. 1 minute he was chasing a contract in Ikeja. The next minute he was attending a business meeting in Lekki. And by the time night would reach, he would still be typing on his laptop as if the keyboard was owing him money. And because Lillian was an understanding girlfriend with a certificate, she did not fight it or argue. Instead, she adjusted herself inside it. Anytime Efe complained of stress, Lillian responded with action, not with mouth. She would cook a heavy soup and send it to his house with a dispatcher that charged small money, which she paid without complaining. When Efe said transport was tight, she sent him transport fare with a message, "Manage this for now, baby. I understand." When his landlord threatened that he would change his door if rent was delayed again, Lillian quietly ran around and added her own savings to complete the money. Then she told him, "Don't worry, we'll settle everything when God blesses us. I understand." The us sounded sweet and deep in her mouth. Efe appreciated her sincerely. He was always thanking her, calling her good woman and encouraging her that she was rare. He never insulted her. He never cheated loudly like Lagos boys, and he never shouted at her. That was why it became hard for Lillian to clearly see that their relationship was floating without an anchor. It was kind, but it was not defined. Ngozi kept shouting from the side like a roadside preacher, "My sister, kindness without clarity is an emotional loan." But Lillian was too busy investing to hear about the emotional bank. She defended Efe fiercely in front of her family. When her mother complained, "This boy has been coming here for how many years now without introduction?" Lillian smiled and replied, "Mommy, modern relationships are different. Let him build first." When her auntie said, "You are wasting your prime time," Lillian replied, "Auntie, please don't rush God." Even when her younger cousin, who just finished NYSC, got engaged before her, Lillian still smiled and wore gele at the introduction, claiming everyone's timing is different. Yet, inside her chest, the pressure was pressing her like a tight shoe. Meanwhile, Efe started changing gradually, not badly though, just upgrading quietly. New clothes began appearing on his body. His shoes changed from worn out to shining. His calls became shorter and more official sounding. He started saying things like, "I have a dinner meeting. I am going for a networking event. I'll be late tonight, baby." And because Lillian had sworn the oath of understanding, she only replied, "No problem, take care, I understand." Sometimes she wanted to ask deeper questions, but she swallowed them like tablets without water. In her mind, too many questions destroy romance. One evening, while she was packing food for him as usual, she jokingly said, "You are now looking like a big man, oh. Soon, you'll forget poor people like me." Efe laughed casually. "Don't worry now. You know I know they're proud." And that answer was enough for Lillian to sleep in peace. As Christmas drew closer, Lillian went back to the market and used the last of her savings to buy matching Christmas clothes for herself and Efe. She bought his own size carefully and folded it with pride, already imagining the two of them walking side by side to church, while people whispered, "They are about to get married." She even practiced the pose she would strike if someone wanted to take their pictures. Ngozi saw the clothes and almost cried. "My sister, you bought couple wear without discussion?" Lillian laughed shyly. "It's just Christmas clothes now." Ngozi shook her head vigorously. "Christmas clothes that carry heavy prophecy." But Lillian had already entered fantasy mode fully. Every night before going to bed, she would smile and say, "After this Christmas, my story would change." By the time it was 3 days to Christmas, Lagos was already behaving as if everybody had inheritance money to spend, because traffic was mad and packed. Markets were full and carols were playing everywhere, even from shops that sold only spare parts. Lillian woke up that morning with a strange happiness inside her chest, because she had dreamt that she and Efe were walking into church together wearing their matching Christmas clothes, while people were secretly pointing at them and whispering, "It has finally happened." She jumped out of bed with smiles and decided to surprise him with food at his office as proof of her wife material submission. She cooked early, packed the food with perfect arrangements, added a small drink, checked her mirror twice and repeated to herself, "Let me go and encourage my future husband." When she got to his office area, the sun was already shining bright like a spotlight. She stood outside for a few seconds to call him, but his phone was not connecting. She smiled and told herself, "Maybe he's inside a meeting. I understand." However, just as she was about to turn and wait under the shade like a loyal fan, a black car rolled into the compound softly with the sound of money. Lillian's eyes followed it casually until the door opened and Efe stepped out, looking as if the scent by itself had finished dressing him. He was wearing a fitted shirt, clean shoes with a confident posture, and beside him stepped down a woman that looked like she belonged to another tax bracket completely. The woman was not overdressed. She was not shouting with makeup. She was just quietly elegant, tall, fresh, calm, and carrying herself like someone whose problems were not basic. Lillian's legs suddenly became weak, as if someone pressed the off button. They were not holding hands, but they were not hiding either. They looked like two people who knew their direction. Before Lillian could process anything, the woman smiled and walked closer to her. "Hi, please, are you waiting for Efe?" Lillian swallowed hard. Yes. The woman smiled again politely. "Oh, okay. Are you his colleague?" Now, that was the question that broke the ground beneath Lillian's feet. Colleague, not girlfriend, not fiancé, not even friend, just colleague. Lillian opened her mouth to speak, but sound refused to come out immediately, like when network disappears at a crucial time. It was Efe that suddenly rushed forward looking flustered. "Lillian, what are you doing here?" She lifted the food flask quickly like evidence. "I brought food for you." Efe collected it slowly and said awkwardly, "Ah, thank you." The high-class woman watched their exchange with curiosity, like someone observing a street drama. "So, should we go?" she asked him calmly. Efe nodded and turned to Lillian. "I'll call you later, okay?" And just like that, they entered the car together and drove off slowly as Lillian stood on the hot ground, looking at the empty space where her dream had been standing 5 minutes ago. People passed by and cars moved, but her world had frozen. She did not even remember how she got home. All she knew was that by the time she reached her room, she sat on the bed and stared at the wall like someone whose brain had traveled without her body. That night, Efe called and said, "Lillian, let's talk." They met outside near a quiet spot because he did not want drama. And to his credit, he did not mock her or lie. He explained, "I care about you, Lillian. You have always supported me. But I told you I wasn't ready for marriage. With Vanessa, our families are aligned and our goals are aligned. This is not replacing you. It is just direction." Lillian listened quietly, nodding like someone in shock that still hears sound. "So, since when?" Efe answered honestly. "Since things started opening up for me." From his response, it was clearly an upgrade of direction that did not include her. When she returned home that night, Ngozi was waiting with folded arms. "You saw something today, Abi?" Lillian sat down slowly. I saw my position in his future. Ngozi held her hand. Not as a wife. Lillian shook her head. Not even as a question. 3 days later, Christmas morning came and Lillian still woke up early like a responsible daughter. She still wore her fine clothes. She still helped her mother cook. And she still smiled at neighbors. But everything she was doing felt like copy and paste because her heart had refused to report for duty. Her phone lay beside her on the kitchen shelf. She kept glancing at it without even knowing what she was expecting again. Deep down, she already knew that today would not be the same Christmas she imagined. But hope is a stubborn thing, and it likes to sit down even when eviction notice had been served. Her mother noticed her attitude. Lillian, why are you this quiet? You didn't even complain about the price of tomatoes. Lillian forced a smile. I'm just tired, mommy. They finished cooking and neighbors began to drop in. Relatives started calling. The house gradually became filled with laughter that did not enter her. Still, she got no call from Efe. And then, at exactly 11:42 a.m., her phone vibrated. Her heart jumped and she grabbed her phone. But it was only an advert message from the network provider wishing her a Merry Christmas. She laughed, not because it was funny, but because it hurts. By afternoon, Ngozi arrived with a small takeaway pack and heavy silence on her face. The two of them sat on Lillian's bed without talking for a long time, like people attending a burial wake. Finally, Ngozi sighed and showed her the phone. Lillian looked at the screen and saw it clearly this time. It was a video of Efe and Vanessa at a Christmas family gathering. Their parents were smiling. The aunties were taking pictures and uncles were shaking hands. It wasn't really an engagement, but it was a serious alignment. And that was when Lillian understood something that entered her bones deeply. She had been preparing for marriage alone, while Efe was preparing for life seriously. She inhaled deeply and said something that broke Ngozi's heart. So, this is what alignment looks like. Ngozi held her hand tightly. You didn't do anything wrong. Lillian shook her head slowly. I did. I assumed instead of asking. In the evening, Mama Lillian was finally convinced of the unusualness of her daughter's silence. She followed her into the backyard and sat beside her on a low stool where dried clothes were hanging like tired flags. She said, "My daughter, where is that boy?" Lillian paused for a long time before answering. He's celebrating Christmas with his future. Mama Lillian did not ask further questions. She only nodded slowly and said something gentle but sharp. Understanding is good, but when you understand too much, you forget yourself. That statement entered her like a quiet slap. That night, Lillian did not dress up again. She stayed inside while people were moving around visiting neighbors. When fireworks began to boom outside, she pulled up a blanket over her head, not because she hated Christmas, but because this Christmas had shown her too much truth at once. Her phone vibrated by 9:17 p.m. It was Efe. He texted, "Merry Christmas, Lillian. I hope you are fine." She stared at the message for a very long time. There was no apology, just a simple Christmas greeting from someone who had clearly moved on. She did not reply immediately, but later she typed slowly and sent, "Merry Christmas, Efe. I wish you well." January entered Lillian's life like a strict teacher that does not smile during her class, because immediately Christmas packed its bag and fireworks stopped shouting. Reality cleared his throat and said, "Now, let's be serious with life." Lillian woke up that morning feeling like somebody that attended a party overnight and forgot her hat on the dance floor. The house became quiet again. Relatives returned to their houses. Neighbors stopped knocking for rice, and even Christmas clothes lost their sparkle. On the first Monday of January, Lillian dressed up and went to work as if nothing happened. But inside her chest, something had shifted permanently. She was simply thinking clearly clearly for the first time in a long while. Ngozi noticed it immediately and said, "You are too calm." Lillian smiled faintly. "I am tired of imagination." For weeks, Efe did not call again and Lillian did not wait. Now, that was the biggest change in her life. She stopped checking her phone with anxiety. She stopped building silent expectations and she stopped replying life with maybe. One afternoon, she ran into Efe unexpectedly at a traffic light. He was in his car while she was on a bus. They saw each other through the glass like two people watching an old season of a show that no longer interested them. He waved politely and she nodded calmly. Later that evening, Ngozi asked her, "How did it feel?" Lillian thought small and replied, "It felt like seeing someone I once knew, not someone I was waiting for." And that was when both of them knew that something had truly ended clean. Efe continued his hustle steadily with Vanessa by his side. No bad news followed them. Life simply moved forward and Lillian finally faced herself properly. She began to notice how she used to give explanations for everything she deserved, how she used patience to silence her own questions, and how she treated hope like a contract without signature. Slowly, she started saying, "No, I don't like that." She started asking direct questions and she started expressing her need without an apology. Even at work, people noticed. They began to say, "Lillian is now bold, oh." Well, she wasn't bold, she was just no longer shrinking. One Saturday evening, as she sat on her bed with Ngozi scrolling through her phone, she suddenly laughed at herself and said out loud, "So, I was building marriage alone?" Ngozi replied, "Your imagination was the groom." They both laughed until tears came. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. What lesson did you learn from this story? Kindly share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye!